Hello. This is a new segment called Get Ready to Be Scared on the Confused Sheep channel. Here, we share real paranormal stories from Reddit. Won't keep you waiting. Enjoy the video. The Book of Death Signs. I saw it once when I was in middle school. It was a thick book, like a dictionary or an encyclopedia. And all it contained were endless pages of people's faces, what they looked like before and after death. On the right page was a photo of the person's face while they were alive, and on the left, a photo of their face after death. I don't know who made such a book, for what purpose, or how, but it's said to be a secret reference material among people involved in fortune telling. And according to them, if you look through that book every day, you'll eventually become able to recognize the death signs that appear on a person's face before they die. The person who showed me that book was a teacher at the test prep course I was attending at the time. That was over 20 years ago. He was working part-time at a cram school for a few years after graduating from college. Then one day he said, "I'm going to Bali to study white magic," and after that, no one ever heard from him again. This is a story I heard from that teacher. Let's call him Brian. When Brian was a college student, he got his hands on that book of death signs and spent every day staring at it. He barely attended classes and was deeply immersed in the occult. But he liked mountain climbing and would sometimes show up to the university's hiking club. One day, he was supposed to go on a winter mountain trip and met up with the group at a small station near the Catskill Mountains. When he looked at the faces of the group members who had gathered, Brian realized for the first time that death signs really do exist. Naturally, Brian refused to climb the mountain and desperately tried to stop them, shouting, "All of your faces have death signs." But they just laughed and said, "Huh, what are you talking about? Do you think you're some kind of psychic?" They left Brian behind, and the other four headed off into the mountains. A few days later, while watching TV at home, Brian saw a news report that members of the university's hiking club had gone missing. To his shock, Brian's name was listed among those missing. Shocked, he immediately contacted the university and got in touch with other hiking club alumni who had gone climbing with the group. Then they rushed to Woodstock, the town they usually used as a base for mountain trips. Due to bad weather, the search had to be postponed until the next day. With nothing else to do, Brian headed to a familiar cafe they always visited after coming down from the mountains. There, he saw the supposedly missing members casually chatting at a table as if nothing had happened. Brian, surprised, ran over and sat with them, happily saying, "You guys made it out alive." Then, one of them, holding a newspaper, placed it on the table and said quietly, "You've got a death sign. That thing you talked about. The death signs, right?" He stared at Brian and gave him a creepy smile. Chilled to the bone, Brian ran into the restroom in the back of the cafe and looked into the mirror. But there was nothing there, nothing that looked like a death sign. When he came out, the members who had just been there were nowhere to be seen. He asked the cafe owner, "Where did my friends go?" But the owner just tilted his head and gave a vague response. According to the owner, you suddenly came in and sat down alone at a table, talking to yourself. Then you suddenly ran into the restroom. Brian, puzzled, looked down at the table and picked up the newspaper that had been left there. There was an article about the missing hiking club, with 5 photos of their faces. At the very bottom was Brian's photo. The other 4 all had clear death signs on their faces. It looked like my son. It's been a while, but I'm back with a new story. My kids have been camping in the living room for the summer. My daughter woke me up last night and said she was up getting a drink and her brother was scaring her. She said he was sitting in the chair in the front room, the living room. Front family room. mudroom, and kitchen are kinda built with an open concept so you can see each room from wherever you're standing in. So she came upstairs. I thought my son was just up, and I was going to have to get them both back to bed. But when I got down there, he was passed out snoring on the couch. So I just told my daughter that it was probably the dog and laid her back down. I asked her about it this morning, and she said it was crouched down in the chair picture, the way a gargoyle sits. That's what came to my mind when she described it. She said it had the shape of our dog, but the face of my son. And she said hi to it, thinking it was him, but it didn't respond, it just stared at her. That's what freaked her out, and made her come get me. I told her if she ever sees anything strange to tell it to go away, but now I'm worried. The reflection on the train door. It happened one night on the New York City subway. I was exhausted from work and standing near the door of the train. Right in front of me was a young woman. She was leaning back against the door, reading a paperback. A plain-looking girl with long blonde hair. I kept a bit of distance at first, but as more people piled into the train, I got pushed closer to her. It felt awkward to face her directly, so I turned my body slightly to the side. Then I glanced at the door's glass. It was dark outside, so my face was reflected in the glass, ... And right beside it, I could see the back of the woman's head. But something felt ... off, so I took a closer look in the reflection. Maybe it was just the lighting, but her hair looked strangely white in the glass. But the real woman standing in front of me, her hair was definitely blonde. The train got more crowded, and before I knew it, I was almost pressed up against her. She must have given up on reading, because she turned her back to me and stared out the window. I looked again, yes, the back of her head was still blonde. That's when I noticed the young guy next to me. He had AirPods in, and he was clearly nervous, shifting uncomfortably, glancing up and down, over and over. He kept trying to inch away from the door. Then I realized why. In the reflection of the door, the woman's face was the face of an old woman with white hair. The real woman didn't move at all. She just stood there, motionless. But the face in the reflection, she slowly tilted her head and kept turning to look back and forth between me and the guy next to me. If I'd run into a ghost out on the street, I would have bolted without thinking. But here we were trapped in a packed train car, pressed up against something we didn't understand. I tried to move away from her, but people shoved me back. I got elbowed a couple times. The guy next to me looked panicked. He yanked his AirPods out like he was tearing them from his ears. Finally, the train reached the next station. At the exact same time, the two of us shouted, "We're getting off." We shoved through the crowd and dashed out the opposite door. Then we turned back to look. Even though the train car was still full of people, I could clearly see the old woman's reflection in the door, staring at us through the gaps between people. For the few seconds before the train pulled away, she never looked away. After it was gone, the guy and I stood there in silence. We made eye contact. We didn't need to say anything, but I still asked, "You saw her too, right?" At the exact same time, he asked, "Did you hear her too?" He said that instead of music, his AirPods had started playing a whispering voice. A voice that still lingered in his ears. I have no idea what that thing was. All I know is, I'm glad I wasn't the one wearing AirPods. The one I never picked up. I-24F passed by the same stretch of road almost every night. For about 5 years, off and on. I kept feeling like someone was in the back seat of my car as I drove at night, always between 9 p.m. to 12 a.m. Without me knowing, my mother was also experiencing this as well as my best friend. Only recently did we figure this out, and my mother and I started talking about it. We were shocked to find that we often have the same image in our minds of what this woman looks like. Late 1800s, early 1900s clothing, with a high-collar button-up shirt, long plaid skirt, and a pointy-aged face, sunken eyes, but not older than 70. A few months ago, I was driving home from my friend's house and got the feeling she was in my car, again only. This time it was much heavier. It felt like she was inches from my face. When I passed a house with a porch light on, I clearly saw the outline of someone sitting in the passenger seat. It looked like a gray mist, and then a nearly visible face, exactly like the one my mom and I both described. I froze. After that, I started testing it. Every night that I felt her there, I'd check to see if it could have just been the light. But nothing else ever caused it. Now, because I do believe in ghosts, but also believe in seeing faces and patterns, or light eye, wanted to be sure. But the feeling of presence was always unmistakable. I haven't felt her in a while now. I've tried to find records death, history, anything from that era boot. I've come up with nothing. So for now, I just keep driving by and hoping she doesn't jump scare me again. Something beneath the bed. I lived in a suburban area near a railway station that was supposedly built right over an Indian burial ground, where they neglected to remove the bodies before placing the tracks. So you could only imagine how disturbed these spirits were. Our neighbors that had lived at the end of the court had shared an experience with my parents. One night they went out to their backyard to calm their 2 dogs, who were barking uncontrollably toward their double-doored back gate. When they went to investigate, they saw a tall, broad figure standing in the corner by the house and the gate. As they got closer, they realized it was a headless man, standing still and motionless. Terrified, they grabbed the dogs and rushed inside. I overheard my parents telling this story. As interesting as it was, I remained skeptically as a child. I was maybe 5 or 6 years old at the time, and you don't remember much at that age. But I remember that night vividly. We lived in a single-story house, with a long hallway from the living room to the garage, with bedrooms and a bathroom in between. My sister and I shared the far end of the hallway, our doors across from each other. We always slept with our doors open. I was lying on my side in my white iron daybed from the 90s, looking out into the hallway, trying to fall asleep. That's when I saw him. A pale, grayish little boy with no clothes came crawling fast and unnaturally into my room on his hands and knees. He came around the corner of the door and raced straight toward my bed. Then he vanished at my bedside, right out of sight. I was frozen, too scared to move or even look over the edge to see if he was still there. After just a few seconds, he popped up beside my bed, stared into my eyes, lifted his hands, and shoved me in the stomach. Then he dropped back down, disappearing below the mattress again. I curled up from the force, crying, stunned. Eventually, I peeked over the edge, and there was nothing. He was completely gone. As I grew older, I'd randomly remember that moment, vividly and in detail, even though I have no other memories from that night. He never appeared to me again, not for the rest of the time we lived in that house. She's trying to speak. Hi all, we've had a spirit in our house for a while, only messing with the lights. Every now and again, we usually ask if they can sort the lights, and usually they do. We've named them Ethel, although actual info about the ghost is unknown. At first, it all felt lighthearted, just flickers, small noises, and little responses when asked. Today we got knocks and clear communication back from them, though at first we thought it was my housemate, but nobody else was home at the time, and the knocking came directly underneath where my friend and I were sitting. We could even feel the vibrations. When we knocked back, we got a response. That's when we realized this wasn't human. We've also had it mess more with the lights lately and make noises, especially in the lower levels of the house. The most bizarre thing, the spirit fully turned the Wi-Fi off and back on again, on request, just like it does with the lights, and nobody even touched the router. This isn't something that could have happened by accident. Before heading upstairs this evening, while sitting in the lounge where the spirit is most active, my evil eye bracelet broke. The hook just fell off. When I tried to reattach it, the hook wouldn't fit back into the jump ring without me forcibly opening it. It made no sense, shouldn't have fallen off. After reconnecting it another way, it came apart again. My friend then noticed that a bead from her evil eye bracelet had gone missing too. We're both pretty spooked now. We don't want to agitate the spirit, but it does seem like things are escalating. My housemate thinks we should try a Ouija board to communicate with Ethel, but honestly, I don't know if that's a good idea or not. We're feeling unsure and would appreciate any advice. The photos I never took. I solemnly swear that I speak the truth. It was summer, sometime after my 13th or 14th birthday, and I was home alone. With nothing to do, I started swiping through my phone gallery to kill time. Then I noticed 2 photos I didn't remember taking. Pictures of my bedroom, taken from the doorway at around 10 a.m. The lighting was warm and natural, and my bed was completely made up. That's what really disturbed me, because there was no way in hell I was awake at that time during summer break, let alone tidying up my bed. The photos were time-stamped within a few days of my birthday, but I couldn't tell if it was before or after. Then I saw it. In the corner of the bed, near the bed frame, there was a black shape like 2 faces merged together. I couldn't make out the expression exactly, but it definitely wasn't happy. I checked the second photo, and sure enough, the thing was still there, in the exact same spot. I showed a few friends, just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. They confirmed it looked weird and unsettling. So I went to my mom, who's very into spiritualism and paranormal stuff, and asked what she thought. She looked at them, then simply said, "You should delete that." After that, she completely forgot about the photos. Every time I brought it up again, she would shut down, get uneasy, and tell me to stop talking about ghosts. I think maybe she thought I had downloaded the photos from the internet or something. But deep down, I felt she knew more than she let on. Still, for some reason, I listened to her. I deleted the only photos that proved I wasn't alone that morning. I don't blame anyone for not believing Mitz you're right, but I know what I saw, and I wish I hadn't deleted those pictures. That's how I lost the only proof of my paranormal experience. Quiet after the scream. Hello, I told a story about my baby brother, Anthony. Now, this is the one that put his experience in a light that could no longer be shut off. My mother and I were the main witnesses for this. Anthony is now about 8 years old. There were little things that happened between the time he was 5 to this moment, but this was different. A little backstory. I live in California. I grew up on a farmhouse that was newly built in the early 90s. My father worked in cement. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortably middle class. It was a Saturday morning, and my mom was rushing around to run errands, trying to get Anthony ready. I was in the garage cleaning a new rifle my dad had given me a .22 for hunting small game. Anthony wasn't cooperating. He'd developed a real baby of the family attitude. He was playing with an old metal construction truck, driving it along the walls and leaving black streaks. My mom yelled, took the toy away, and put it on the top shelf in Anthony's closet. Then she told him to stay in his room until she was ready to help him get dressed. Anthony was screaming at the top of his lungs, nothing new. That was typical for him. Meanwhile, in his room, he had a large football-shaped toy chest full to the brim with toys. As I reassembled my rifle, I heard a loud boom from inside the house. My mom ran into the garage, thinking I'd fired the gun, but I was still putting it back together. She looked at the pieces on the table and started to say something, but suddenly, the house went eerily quiet. Anthony had stopped screaming, dead silent. We rushed to his room. His face was dry from tears, but he had this strange, almost satisfied grin. Then we saw it. The toy chest was upside down, and the metal truck was sitting on top of it. My mom turned to me and asked why I did that. I told her I couldn't have. I hadn't even left the garage. She made me try flipping the chest. I could barely move it, and when I tried, the toys spilled everywhere. She didn't say anything, just turned and went to call my father. She told us not to touch the chest or the truck until he got home. My dad, an old-school bodybuilder, used to bench 500 pounds. My max is 315, arrived later. He asked me to flip the chest again. I showed him I couldn't. He tried himself, and he couldn't flip it either, not without everything dumping out. That's when he turned to Anthony. Anthony said simply, "Someone wanted me to have the trunk." He refused to say more. Later, my mom took him to the doctor for every test she could think of, then to a priest to bless the house. Anthony was baptized soon after. My father never talks about it. The most he's ever said is, "That day changed our family dynamic." We all need a John. Back in 2018, we bought a 1928 duplex. Super quaint and cute. Right off the bat, the house felt different than all the others we had seen. During settlement, the previous owner said, "If you take care of the house will take care of you." Well, my father and brother proceeded to junk up the house. Food left out, things all over the place, soda cans on the ground. This was very abnormal behavior, but my father was recently divorced. To his defense, he was in a depression. Anyway, we started to notice weird things around the house. A mixing spoon popped up out of a very deep bowl and landed in the middle of the kitchen floor. A shadow figure would be seen going through the house. One particular day, my brother called me freaking out. He said soda cans were rolling across the floor violently on their own, and he saw an old man sitting in the chair on the back porch. He even called the police. A week later, my father saw an old man standing in the sunroom dressed in sweatpants and a gray shirt. As my father's depression got better, and I continued maintaining the home while he no longer junked it up, things calmed down. The house was clean, the house was calm. Only when we started painting did my grandmother see a shadow figure walk from my brother's room and through the banister of the steps. Then, about 6 months later, our neighbor's demon child tried kicking in the front door because he claimed my brother had something of his. These kids are about 10 to 11 at this time. Finally, my brother caved and let him in, because he was terrified and afraid he would be hurt if he did not. The neighbor kid searched all over our home for this item, I can't remember what it was, and then finally he goes in the basement. He came flying up the stairs, yelling about an angry old man down there. He refused to ever even come on our porch again, even 3 years after that, until he moved. One day my father spoke with the previous owner, and she shared similar experiences. After talking to the neighbor and doing some property history lookup, we discovered that in the 1990s, an 86-year-old man named John died on the back patio after spilling something. It happened in the basement, and he had opened the rear basement door for ventilation. John is who we had been seeing. We realized that John is a very friendly presence, and to this day, we still experience activity. I was on the phone with a friend and saw a gray mass go from my closet over to the other wall and told my friend what had happened. I have since bought my own home and moved. My new home felt different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I realized that my home lacks that energy. My dad's home itself feels like it is alive, as if the home itself is its own being. We would even jokingly sign John's name on cards, and whenever I stop by, I always yell, "Hi John. John's cool. I miss him." My current home is the only non-haunted home I've ever lived in, and I dislike it. I've lived in one other home aside from John's house, and that one had some very negative energy, which is a whole different story. John is a pretty cool dude. We all need a John.